Hi, welcome. This is the Parent Exchange, and my name is Tillie Elvrum, and I am your host here at Parent Support for Online Learning. And I'm so glad that you are here with us today because I have a special guest and someone that has been along for my family's online education journey from the beginning. Back when we enrolled in 2004, Mickey Revenaugh was here in the online education space, making opportunities for families like mine, and has fought many battles alongside families across the country and now globally in her role. And so let me introduce to you Mickey Revenaugh. She is a co-founder of Connections Academy, which is one of the country's pioneering online K through 12 online public schools here in the country. And since 2002, when they were founded, they now serve over 100,000 students globally as part of Pearson's education portfolio. And now Mickey works, and her current role is focused on innovation and educational opportunities for families that really are going to, I think, change the face of education for everybody, like artificial intelligence and immersive technologies. And now her role is the director for new products and solutions and new school models for Pearson Global Schools. In addition to everything she does with Pearson, she's the board vice chair for the Aurora Institute, which is formerly known as iNACOL. She's the board chair for the Brooklyn Laboratory Charter School, a school that received a $10 million prize from the XQ Institute for Innovative School Design. And previously, Mickey has really done it all. She was there during the E-rate initiative that really worked to get internet into every public school in the country. And then she was the technology editor for Scholastic. So her expertise is deep and her knowledge is wide, and we are so glad that she is here today. And the reason I wanted Mickey to join us today is schools are still reopening across the country. We still see families struggling under remote learning, being delivered by their school districts or in the traditional setting. And we've really worked hard to make a distinction here at Parent Support for Online Learning between what remote crisis learning is and the intentional, robust online learning that families like mine experienced in full-time online settings. And so Mickey was there at the beginning as a founder of one of these amazing schools. And I really wanted to bring her in today to share her historical perspective and her knowledge about what went into building these schools and how they were created and the intentional work that went into making these experiences so good for students. And we've seen now over the course of the last 2 decades, we've seen students now do their entire education, kindergarten through 12th grade, in full-time online schools. And that couldn't have happened without people like Mickey Revenaugh. So Mickey, welcome.
Thank you so much. It's a thrill to be here. And you know what's really fun is that we actually now have some students who graduated from our schools who are teaching in our schools.
Yeah, a student near and dear, I think, to both of us, Anna Marie Revenaugh.
That's right.
She's been on the show, and we're just so proud of her. And so many, there's now this new
whole generation.
Yeah,
that's right.
It's incredible. And Mickey was there. Mickey was there with these students when they were just, junior high, high school, and now they're educators with Connections Academy and Pearson, which is incredible.
Well, and one of the things that's so striking, Tillie, is that first of all, everything old is new again. So many of the same battles that we needed to fight 2 decades ago to sort of bring this kind of opportunity to families, we're needing to fight again, but in a slightly different way. So neither of us could have predicted that that this pandemic would come along and suddenly make online learning or some version of it part of almost every student's experience in the US and frankly around the world. I mean, some of the data shows that 9 out of 10 kids were learning from home during some
Wow.
point in the last 6 months around the entire globe. That's a lot of students. So,
Yeah.
and I think what you mentioned earlier about how do we kind of create these experiences so that it's not a poor substitute for a learning experience that was a really valuable one, but instead one that in some ways we would argue is even better than what an awful lot of students get in a traditional face-to-face environment. Those are the same battles that we're fighting in terms of convincing people that it's possible. And then also the same inspiration that we're taking from families like yours to say, we can show you how to make this work so that your students not just survive, but really thrive in this crazy year, 2 years, however long it will last that we're all going through.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, take us back to 2002, what those conversations were like, and what need did you all see that wasn't happening in the traditional setting, and what were you guys trying to accomplish back,
Way
20
back
years
then.
ago, way then?
Well, we were really looking at the confluence of technology and what technology allowed people to do in their normal lives outside of school. What we were all starting to do with technology in our lives as consumers, as workers, as citizens, coming together with the sense that that one size does not fit all. That the traditional, the school down the street, sit in the desk like everybody else and listen to the same thing that everybody else is listening to wasn't necessary as as the metaphor for educating children, that we ought to have as much choice in the way students learn as we have when we're buying toothpaste at the supermarket, that there's something for everyone, and that technology and the advancement of education thought and theory should come together in a way that allows really personalized experiences for students. And that kind of personalization really is difficult to have happen in a face-to-face environment, even with a superstar teacher. And I know some, and I know you know some too, that are amazing and miraculous in a face-to-face classroom, but they've got 30 kids sitting there staring at them, and they know that, maybe 20% of them are actually attending to every single thing that's going on in the classroom, and 80% of them are either ahead or behind or bored or daydreaming or whatever it might be. And so this notion that face-to-face education was somehow magical and good for everyone was absolutely clear back in 2002 that that just wasn't the case, and that we really believed that technology could help make a better experience for everybody. And so once you took the idea off the table, that one teacher had to have custodial care of 30 students all day long, every day, and attend to their every need, and deliver all the content and do all the assessment and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, but instead thought technology can actually help deliver some of this and allow teachers to do what they do best, which is really understand the learning needs of every child and speak to those learning needs. Then all of a sudden the sky was the limit. And of course, the technology we had back in 2002, it was a little clunky compared to what we have today, but the same basic idea of creating content that students could interact with directly, that would be engaging and interesting and have instructional intelligence kind of built into it. And then using the data that came out of the students' engagement with that to equip teachers to really do very powerful one-on-one, one-on-small group kind of instruction was the model that we're still using today. We happen to have groovier technology tools that make some of that work, but it's basically still the same model. And it's why we get fantastic teachers like Mrs. Revenaugh, who go through this kind of experience and come back and say, that's how I want to teach, because my highest value as a teacher isn't standing in front of a classroom delivering content. It's helping every student reach their full potential in a way that's really unique to them.
Yeah, I think you're really speaking to the relationships that
Yeah.
we had. And, I think back to 2004 when we started, and JD was in third grade. And it really, for me, after coming out of the traditional public school setting, it really wasn't so much about the bells and whistles and how fancy the video was. That was great, but it really was about the support that I had as a parent to be involved in JD's education on a day-to-day basis, and to be there for all those light bulb moments that happened throughout his day and throughout his education. And but it was all due to, it was the teacher. And we've
Yeah.
heard so much pushback, from the traditional systems. You can't replace a teacher, and that was never
Not the
the
intention ever.
intention
Yeah.
ever.
Yeah.
No. Yeah. And so I love that, you can talk about how the technology has changed and how you've improved it, but at the core it was always the teachers and the quality curriculum and the support that you could give to the learning coach, the parent,
Right.
or whoever the caring adult was, to get those kids the personalization that they needed. Talk a little bit about, you talked about how we're still kind of fighting some of
Yeah.
the same battles. What were those battles at the start? And why do you think we're still kind of having the same conversations 20 years later?
I think a lot of it comes down to this fundamental misunderstanding about the role of the teacher. And as you mentioned, it was never the intention to replace the teacher ever. And in fact, one of my proudest experiences was having like a kindergarten teacher say, I miss the hugs around the knees that I used to get from my kids when I was with them face to face, but I know them and I know their families so much better now than I ever could have. And so I think there is this sense of needing to persuade the regulatory powers that be, communities and others, that this wasn't some evil master plan to get rid of teachers, but instead to allow them to do what they do best in a way that is pretty unconstrained. And then honestly, it's a little bit about trusting parents, to be honest with you. It's like, I think there's this sense that parents and kids, by the way, because one of the interesting things that I've discovered working globally is that as much as regulators don't necessarily trust parents, sometimes parents don't trust their own kids to do what it is that they need to do in terms of learning. But the sense that how could a parent possibly know what the right thing was for their student when it came to education? And we've sort of seen over and over again that in fact, we use this term sometimes, you have your PhD in your kid. Nobody knows your child better as a learner than you do. And so you, in combination with a fantastic teacher or team of teachers, there's almost no stopping you in terms of how much you can get out of your child and for your child. But it does take allowing parents into that process in a way that most traditional schools don't really. I mean, they want you to bring the cupcakes, and they want you to chaperone the field trip, but they don't really want you involved too much in what happens in the classroom. And in a virtual school, you are involved with what happens in the classroom. If you're not directly engaged in helping be the world's best teacher's assistant to a great teacher, you have incredible visibility into what's happening with your child. And that can be a little nerve-wracking and scary for educators to have parents have that kind of visibility and voice in what happens with their children's education. But then they soon discover that that is a superpower that allows them to combine with their own superpowers that does amazing things for kids. So that's been a battle that is needed to be refought in every state where there's been a virtual school. It cracks me up that on a dime in one day last spring, those doubts disappeared on the part of every school system and every governor and every commissioner of education in every state. All of a sudden, everybody was at home and their parents were really expected to be involved with their kids' education in a way that nobody really signed up for. But I think part of what has come out in these past few months is the sense that that there's actually a lot to be said for that combination, that 1+1 adds up to more than, adds up to 3 or 4 when it comes to supporting a kid's education.
Yeah.
So that's exciting. But now that same battle is being fought globally as well, in other places where parents just have never had a say. They basically, kind of deposit their kids at the school door. And if they interact with the teachers, it's to give them a hard time sometimes about their kid's grade, but it's not being engaged together, in a really deep way. So that's, I think, a biggie. There's a few other ones that I can get into more if we want to remember our days marching in front of the Ohio State Capitol. I have a great picture of you and JD standing there with fists raised, fighting for your virtual school. But
that was a battle, and I we still see it play out. I mean, I love that you talk about, they want parents to show up for the bake sale, and my response was like, I'm not here for the bake sale. I'm here to make sure that my kid gets the very best education that he can get. And, as his first teacher and his number one advocate, I need to be a part of that. And that wasn't offered to me in the traditional setting. I could have done PTA, and shout out to all those moms and dads who that's their outlet. That's how that they contribute to their kids' schools and educations. But I needed more. My kid needed more.
Yeah.
And I needed to feel like a partner in my son's education. And that's what Connections Academy gave to me as a parent. And so, but it, the very first year I became a Connections Academy parent, the school was targeted for a budget cut.
Yeah.
And that was in Pennsylvania. And then we moved to—
Oh gosh, that's right. You followed us from state to state.
Oh,
You're a sucker for punishment, aren't you?
In JD's 10 years as an online student, there was only one session that I wasn't in a state house across the country fighting for him just to have the model of education he needed to be successful. And so, the fact of the matter, you said at the flip of a switch, every kid became a remote learner. And all of a sudden in states, we're seeing now, where they gave us such a hard time and we had to, picket Arnie Duncan's, at a rally and all kinds of crazy things. Now they're like, okay, everybody open a virtual school. And it's like this free-for-all. And so it's been interesting to kind of see, I don't know, the political whiplash happening where some groups are like, oh no, we want virtual learning. And they used to sit across from us, testifying against us and what we wanted to do. So it's been a ride.
Fascinating. Fascinating.
It really has been. But let's talk about, you talked about globally and what you're doing. And I'm really interested to hear, we know here in the United States, we've been doing it now for like 2 decades and seen its growth and evolution, but what's happening globally? I know Pearson has done some really incredible things in India and the UK, and what's happening?
So so the whole world is looking to the United States and going, oh my gosh, you guys have actually done this fairly successfully with state-sponsored, publicly funded online learning. That doesn't exist anyplace else. It really doesn't. Maybe 1 or 2 pockets in some small places, but really not in any way that you can point to and say there's anything like the virtual public school ecosystem that exists in the United States. But ministries of education all over the world are recognizing that that they need to have this as something that's available for their students and their schools, whether that's to accommodate the sudden shutdown that might come, as this pandemic lingers on, or frankly, to prepare their students for the future. It's like the traditional form of education has always done just great for kids who are going to do just great no matter what. And for the vast majority of students, it doesn't really at this point prepare them well for what the future will be like. So, country after country is now saying, there's something that we can learn from what we had to do in an emergency way over the past 6 months, and that what we should be building into our education systems going forward. But parents aren't waiting for that in most places. They're jumping ahead and basically demanding, private pay online learning, if they can have that available to them. So, we have our Pearson Online Academy virtual private school that serves students globally that is more than doubling in size from where it was last year. We served about 1,000 kids in 55 different countries around the world last year. We're going to be at close to 2,500 this fall. And again, from all over the world. We now have a UK curriculum online schools that we're starting to develop and roll out, ranging from sort of more traditional, modeled after what in America we would probably call like the Harry Potter kind of school with 500-year-old buildings and like deep traditions. How do you take that online? As well as project-based learning and future skills focused online learning that will be available within the next year to 2 years to families literally everywhere around the globe. And I trust parents, I trust consumers to drive an awful lot of this, because if we needed to wait for the sort of education establishment, I guess, to step up, we could have waited a really long time. Post-COVID, I fear there might be a little bit of, swinging back a little bit of the pendulum, but I don't think families will sit still for that. I think they're going to want as much access to as much opportunity as they possibly can get all over the world.
Amazing. I hope that that's the result. I mean, it's been a concern, I think, for many of us in the online education world, that there would be this pendulum shift or this backlash because remote learning, this crisis experience, it was rough. It was uneven, chaotic. The fact of the matter that we still have 66,000 students in Colorado that don't have internet access, that we still have students after all the CARES Act money and all of these things, that students still don't have devices, that are logged out. There's concerns, there's really big concerns, but I hope, like you said, I don't think parents will wait. I think we know the power of parents. When they see that their kids aren't getting their needs met, they won't wait, and parents make a way. They figure it out. Right. How many times did I get told as a parent, your child's education wasn't worth as much as the kid next
down the
door,
street. Yep.
The kid down the street, or your school just needed totally different accountability standards. And thousands of parents across the country have rallied for this model of education. And I think, no matter where no matter where they are in the world, they want better for their kids.
Yep.
They will make a way. But it's our job to give them the resources and the tools and help them fight for that. So,
right.
Thank you to Pearson for really branching out. And then I think the lesson, it's amazing to me to hear that other countries are looking to us.
I know.
And our expertise at a time where a lot of times that's happening due to the politics of the day. But in this particular moment, they're looking to us. And my message is, because maybe to the folks in North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, Rhode
New
Island,
York.
Maryland, New York, that families can access the same type of online education that my family accessed in Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Colorado. We need to get our act together, because the world is watching, and it's beyond time that families, have the opportunity to access these schools, because families, they need it. They really need it. And, like you said, we can't always depend on the establishment to come along for the ride, and we've got to force it a little bit.
Well, and the other thing that's really exciting to me, and I think about JD a lot, right, is that the other force of nature that I think will make this happen is actually the young people themselves. Because, I mean, we've seen over and over again where, young people will say, school is the only place. It's like a technology desert. Every place else I go, I have access to these technology tools that allow me to connect with my friends and express myself and learn whatever I need to learn when I want to learn it. And then I walk into a school building and I have access to none of that. In fact, I have to check my phone someplace far away where I don't have access to it. And I don't think they're going to stand for it, to be honest with you. I think this Generation Z and Alpha generation, young people, this is their birthright. This access to education as they see fit, when they see fit, is something that they're going to demand as well. So even if their parents aren't their fierce advocates, they'll be their own advocates. And I'm so excited about that, because the other thing that is absolutely true about this kind of education is it prepares young people to advocate for themselves as learners in a way that no other form of education really does. And that serves them well, as I'm sure you've seen, when they get into higher education and beyond that into the world of work and beyond. They know what they need and they know how to go and get it, and nothing is going to stand in their way.
Yeah, I think you wrote a great piece a couple years ago talking about this generation, kind of the DIY. They hack their learning.
Yes, they do.
They know how to pull pieces of what they need, the personalization that they need. And, I've seen this with my own children as they go and look to create their own careers. They're not signing up to a company and working, for 30 years. They're the masters of the side hustle, and, they juggle a lot, and that's just how they're wired. And I know just from, my son's experience that online learning afforded him that. He was able to learn, at his own pace, in his own place, and determine what that was going to look like, and then was able to take everything else and put it into his passions. And that's exciting, and we want that for every kid.
Everybody. Yeah. And you know what, the economy of the future will demand that of everybody. It's not like this is some weird thing that's like maladaptive on the part of today's young people. It actually is perfectly well suited for the world of work and the economy that they're going to inherit. And it's the kids who don't know how to do that that will be really stuck. And that's a shame. We need to be preparing everybody to be that smart and powerful and confident to take what they need from a lot of different places, assemble it in a way that makes sense for them, and drive it forward.
Yeah. Well, so let's talk a little bit about some of these, I don't know, the lingering myths around online education and what it does and what it doesn't do. And I think one of the biggest things that I hear concerns from policymakers and parents, they're so concerned about the social and emotional aspect of education. And I remember when we were moving from Pennsylvania to Ohio, and we had done 2 years with Connections at that time, but it was easy to do because JD had all his buddies from the traditional school setting, his friends from church and sports and all of these things. Well, we were moving to a new community, and my husband and I, doing what a lot of parents do, we were talking about our kid in front of him and he wasn't part of the conversation. And he's just kind of listening to us. And finally we said, well, we're going to have to put him back in a, brick and mortar setting because he's not going to know anybody. And he kind of looked at us and he's like, wait a minute. He goes, is Connections in Ohio? And I was like, well, yeah. And he says, well, I love my school. And it was like this moment. And I said, why am I basing our education decisions on these social and emotional things when I knew what we could compensate? We could make all of those things happen for him. And so it was really at that moment, where you learn from your child.
Yeah.
And I already knew. It was just so crazy because I already knew Connections did a great job at providing those social and emotional supports to families. And, and then I got to Ohio and I decided, okay, now I'm a learning coach, but how can I support the other families in our school? And I became a community coordinator. So right. I helped, organize field trips and learning opportunities for families. So talk about that kind of myth that, our kids get no socialization.
Yeah, they're lonely yeah. and isolated and so on. Well, so it really is pretty fascinating. I think one of the silver linings of the pandemic that we've had is that many people in their work lives have discovered actually how close technology can bring you together with your coworkers in a way that you didn't really predict. And that is absolutely true. Just on the day-to-day, working with your teacher, working with your peers, realm of what students get in online learning is that there's an opportunity to actually connect with people directly that you might not otherwise meet. Find your peeps, so to speak, the people who like the things that you like, are interested in the things that you are interested in, even if they live hundreds of miles away from you or sometimes thousands. And that's a unique and special thing. It gives everybody an opportunity to have the community that's really rich and robust for them, even if that may be partly in person and partly online. And one of the things that whenever I hear kids talk about their friends, they make no distinction about whether they interact with that person online or face-to-face. They don't care. They consider them all their friends, and their friendships are really deep, and they're warm and they're intimate. In addition to that, I was actually just talking to one of our school leaders today about, her school is gaining probably 2,000 new students this
Wow.
year. People who are saying, I actually want a robust from the ground up online learning experience. If I'm going to be virtual anyway, give me something that was built for that. But we sort of decided that anxious parents of anxious kids is sort of the theme of this fall. And so therefore we need to work even harder to make sure that we're attending to those social emotional needs. So that means clubs and activities. That means making sure that we have good group activities for students to be involved with. That means every kid having time that they're spending with their teacher in a much more intimate and personal way than they might have had in a face-to-face classroom. And then leveraging what's available in their local community as well, and giving them time to take advantage of that. It's like, it doesn't do you any good to have a great community theater opportunity in your town if your school schedule doesn't allow you to take advantage of that. And so for all the rising stars out there of Broadway and film that came through our schools, as well as the athletes and the young people who work so hard in service of their community to help make their community a better place. They have time for that in a virtual school. School can work its way around those things that they're passionate about. And it gives them a chance to connect with others and meet those social emotional needs in a way that's not trivial. It's not fake. It's not destructive, which we know that sometimes the social interactions in schools can be, but instead it's nurturing and it builds their sense of self. So I'm a really passionate believer in trying to open people's eyes to just how intimate and warm and supportive these schools really are. And your family and your kids are examples of what that really means on a daily basis.
Yeah, when I think back, And, you know, I have watched many live lessons and participated in many field trips and things over the years. And, you know, I always would tell policymakers that these kids were making, you know, friends and developing relationships at a really genuine level, because, you know, back in the day, it wasn't Zoom. These kids were, you know, they were in a chat,
Yeah.
and so they couldn't see what anybody looked like. They didn't see what clothes they were wearing. They couldn't see what kind of car mom and dad dropped them off at school in. And they were just connecting on a deep level on, oh, you like anime, or we like the
Right.
same band, or, you know, we're both in this, you know, chat pod, you know, during our English class or whatever it was. And so then they would get to these in-person events,
Yeah.
and it happened a million times the same way. They would see each other and go, huh, you don't look the way I thought you would. And I don't care. I don't care, because we already became friends at such a genuine personal level that it wasn't about what anybody looked like or how much money their parents made
Yeah.
or anything
Or
like
if they
that.
talked a little bit funny or their brain
Yeah,
worked a little bit differently. I mean, I think
exactly.
I, I like to think of these online schools really as being the place where all the square pegs that don't fit into the round hole of the traditional school system can flourish. And, you know, it turns out everybody's a square peg.
Yeah.
Everybody is. And so having an opportunity to have a school that's tailored around you is a blessing, you know, for an awful lot of students who would probably do just fine in other kinds of setting, but why put things in the way of their learning when you could actually be supporting them to flourish?
Yeah, yeah. I'm grateful as a parent. I know how much the relationships that, you know, we developed with other families over the years, and like you said, the ability for my son to be able to learn in a safe environment, physically and mentally, meant the world to us. And I think, you know, families, they really appreciate that. We know when parents are evaluating what school quality is, a lot of times it's not about the test scores.
Yeah.
It's about their kids, you know, physical and mental health and well-being. And can they learn it? Can they get everything out of their education without some of the negative uh, behavior things that happen in a traditional school setting? And so that was important to our family, and I know it is for so many families. And I think coming out of this pandemic, we're going to see more families kind of walk out of this experience with that same perspective, I think.
Absolutely. And one of the things, really interesting things you mentioned earlier about, you know, students not having access to technology. And that's shocking to me, is like one of the people who founded the E-Rate is like, seriously, 25 years later, we're still talking about the digital divide. This should have been taken care of a long time ago.
Right.
And some of the educators that we were talking to about this said, you know, really it's about having a student bill of rights, you know, in terms of, it's a student digital bill of rights, that the internet and access to technology is a right that every American ought to be able to count on. And because without it, there's so much of education and work and being a citizen that you can't access. And so let's take this as an opportunity to be inspired to do a lot better and just kind of go to that last mile and take care of this problem and make sure that everybody has what they need. So then they can choose, do I go to a blended school? Do I go to a hybrid school? Do I go to a face-to-face school, but take advantage of community opportunities? Do I go to an online school? Do I do a little bit of everything every single year, depending on what it is that I want? Let's make sure everybody has the full ability to take advantage of all of those things.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you mentioned that, because it's driving me crazy. My nephew is living with us during the week because he doesn't have
Well,
internet at home, and he can't access the only education offered to him by his school district is remote learning right now. And so thank God, as a family, we can compensate but how many kids are falling through the cracks right now because they don't have internet? And so that whole E-rate conversation is a bit maddening. And
Yeah.
you're talking about E-rate, and 10 years ago, I made my first trip to DC to lobby just on broadband
Yep.
investment, and we're still having that conversation.
Not quite there yet. Not quite there
No.
yet. Yeah.
And,
Richest
you know,
country in the world. I think we can do a little bit better. Yeah.
I absolutely agree. And so, you know, I think that's the next frontier. And there, you know, I think there's a lot of parents across the country who are having that conversation. Why can't my kid get the internet he needs to access the online learning that I know is important to
Right.
them? So, so we'll keep pushing. I'll keep pushing if you keep.
I'm going to keep pushing too.
And hopefully we can get that done. Well,
Yeah.
we're running out of time here, but what advice do you have, words of wisdom to, you know, the thousands of families who are going to be starting full-time online schools
Right.
this year, or they're navigating remote learning for another season due to the COVID crisis? What words of wisdom do you have for these families and students?
I would say that the most invaluable thing that a parent can ever have is the front row seat to their kids learning something new. And that for all the roughness and chaos that sometimes we've seen over the last 6 months, for as hard as it is, even in a really well organized online school, you remember those first couple months, that's like drinking out of a fire hose. That's rough, you know?
I went to bed exhausted and worried for like 3 months. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the payback for that, and what each of us should look for every single day is that insight, that view into how your child's mind works, how they are as a learner, which there's no replacement for that. It's worth its weight in more than gold. And you're having the opportunity to see that and do that. And whether you do that throughout their whole educational career, or whether that's just for this year, that's going to pay you back in dividends. It's going to pay them back in dividends. And it's something that, you know, as a parent, you'll never forget. And frankly, I don't think they're ever going to forget it either. When this generation of kids look back on this year, they'll remember that they were scared. They'll remember that they were stressed. They'll remember that it was a little chaotic and hectic. But what they'll really remember is I got to learn in the company of my family, at a time and in a place that felt really comfortable to me. And wow, that's a fantastic gift.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is. Well, that's wonderful advice. And I think families take it to heart. This is a challenge, but with every challenge is opportunity and blessings if we, you know, look for it and keep our minds open to it. Well, Mickey Revenaugh, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been so much fun.
Yeah, I'm just grateful to you for just all your efforts and the work you did to give my son the education that he needed, and the work that you continue to do to open doors for kids all around the world, which is amazing. And we'll keep fighting for families, and we'll keep fighting for innovation, and just knowing that the hard work that you're doing is paving the way for the next generation of teachers and students, and which I think is so exciting. And we're grateful for you and everybody at Pearson.
And they're going to save us all, by the way. So, you know, it's worth
I
every bit of investment.
I have faith. They really are. This generation is amazing. And it's because a world of opportunity is there for them. So let's get them the tools and resources they need. Great.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for letting me be here with you, and keep up the great work. You have a huge fan club all over the country and certainly throughout Pearson. We're all rooting for you here.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mickey Revenaugh. And we will see you all next week on the Parent Exchange. Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.